Hello, friends. So, ironically, I'm pretty sure at the end of the last chapter I asked what will happen with his revenge. And the chapter title of the Count of Monte Cristo, chapter 59, is Revenge. The Count of Monte Cristo bowed to the 5 young men with a sad smile, and getting into his carriage, drove away with Maximilian and Emmanuel. Albert stood wrapped in deep and melancholy thought for a few moments. Then suddenly loosing his horse from the tree around which his servant had tied the bridle, he sprang lightly into the saddle and returned to Paris at a gallop. A quarter of an hour later, he entered his house in the Rue du Helder. As he dismounted from his horse, he thought he saw his father's pale face peeping from behind the curtain of his bedroom. Albert turned away his head with a sigh and went to his own apartments. Once there, he cast a last lingering look at all the luxuries that had once made his life so easy and happy from his childhood. He looked once more at the pictures. The faces still seemed to smile at him, and the landscapes to be animated with brighter colors. Taking from his oak frame the portrait of his mother, he rolled it up, leaving empty and bare the gilt frame that had surrounded it. Then he put all his precious knickknacks in order, went to the cupboards and placed the key in each door, threw into a drawer of his writing desk all the money he had about him, gathered together all the countless pieces of jewelry that were lying about in cups, in jewel cases, and on brackets, and made an exact inventory of all, placing it in a conspicuous place on a table from which he first removed all the books and papers which encumbered it. While he was in the midst of his work, and in spite of the instructions Albert had given that he was not to be disturbed, his servant entered. "What do you want?" Monte asked him in a sad, rather than annoyed tone of voice. "Excuse me, monsieur," said the valet. "I know you forbade me to disturb you, but the Count of Monte has sent for me." "Well?" "I did not wish to go to him before I had received your instructions." "Why?" "Because the Count doubtless knows that I accompanied you to the Bois de Vincennes, no doubt. And if he asks me what happened, what reply shall I make?" "The truth." "Then I am to say the duel did not take place." "Say I apologized to the Count of Monte Cristo. Go." The valet bowed and went out, and Albert returned to his inventory. When he had finished, his thoughts turned to his mother, and as no one was there to announce him, he went straight to her bedroom, but, distressed by what he saw and still more by what he guessed, he paused on the threshold. As the one mind animated these two beings, Mercedes was doing in her room what Albert had been doing in his. Everything was in disorder. Lace, clothing, jewelry, money, all was carefully placed in the drawers, and the Countess was just collecting the keys. Albert saw all these preparations and understood. Calling out "Mother," he threw his arms around her neck. The painter who could have caught the expression on those two faces just then would certainly have made a beautiful picture. All these signs of a firm decision, which gave him no cause for fear where he himself was concerned, alarmed him for his mother. "What are you doing, mother dear?" he asked. "What have you been doing?" was her reply. "Oh, mother," cried Albert, almost too overwhelmed to speak. "It does not affect you as it does me. No, you surely cannot have taken the same resolutions as I have. I have come to inform you that I am leaving this house." "And you?" "I am leaving it too, Albert," replied Mercedes. "I must confess I had reckoned on being accompanied by my son. Was I mistaken? Mother, I cannot let you share the life I have chosen. I must live henceforth without name and without fortune to start my apprenticeship. I must borrow from a friend my daily bread till I can earn it myself. So I am going from here, mother, to friends, to ask him to lend me the small sum of money I think will be necessary." "You are going to suffer hunger, poverty, my son?" exclaimed Mercedes. "Oh, say not so, or you will break all my resolution." "But not mine, mother dear," replied Albert. "I am young and strong, and I think I am brave, and I have also learned since yesterday that what force of will means. Alas, mother, there are those who have suffered so much and yet have not succumbed to their sufferings, but instead have built up a new fortune on the ruins of their former happiness. I have learnt this, mother, and I have seen such men. I know I know that they have risen with such vigor and glory from the abyss into which their enemies had cast them, that they have overthrown their former conquerors. No, mother, from today I have done with the past. and I will accept nothing from it, not even my name. For you understand, do you not, mother, that your son could not bear the name of a man who should blush before every other man? Albert, my son, had I been stronger, that is the evidence I should have given you, said Mercedes. Your conscience has spoken to you when my enfeebled voice was still. Follow its dictates, my son. You had friends, Albert. Break with them, but for your mother's sake, do not despair. Life still has its charms at your age, for you can barely count 22 summers, and as a noble character such as yours must carry with it a name without blemish, take my father's. It was Herrera. Whatever career you pursue, you will soon make this name illustrious. When you have accomplished this, my son, make your appearance again in a world rendered more beautiful by your past sufferings. But even though the golden future I foresee for you should not come to pass, let me at least cherish the hope. I have nothing else left to me. For me, there is no future. And when I leave this house, I go toward my tomb. I shall do as you wish, mother, the young man said. Your hopes are mine. God's anger cannot follow us, you who are so noble and I who am so innocent. But since we have taken our resolution, let us act with all speed. Monsieur de Moncouf left the house about an hour ago. The opportunity is therefore propitious, and we shall be relieved of the necessity of giving any explanations. I am ready, said Mercedes. Albert ran into the boulevard for a cab to take them away. He thought of a nice little furnished house in the Rue de Saint-Péray, where his mother would find a humble but comfortable lodging. As the cab drew up at the door and Albert alighted, a man approached and handed him a letter. Albert recognized the Count of Monte Cristo's steward. From the Count, said Bertruccio. Albert took the letter and read it. Then, with tears in his eyes and his breast heaving with emotion, he went in to find Mercedes and hand it to her without another word. Mercedes read, Albert, while showing you that I have discovered the plans you are contemplating, I hope to prove to you that I have a sense of what is right. You are free. You are leaving the Count's house, taking with you your mother. But remember, Albert, you owe her more than your poor noble heart can give her. Keep the struggle to yourself. Bear all suffering alone, and save her the misery that must inevitably accompany your first efforts, for she has not deserved even one fraction of the misfortune that has this day befallen her. I know you are both leaving Rue de Helder without taking anything with you. Do not try to discover how I know it. It is enough that I do know it. Listen, Albert, to what I have to say. 24 years ago, I returned to my country a proud and happy man. I had a sweetheart, Albert, a noble young girl whom I adored, and I was bringing to her 150 louis which I had painfully amassed by ceaseless toil. This money was for her, and knowing how treacherous the sea is, I buried the treasure in the little garden behind the house in Marseille, which your mother knows so well. Recently, I passed through Marseille on my way from Paris. I went to see this house of sad memories. In the evening, I took a spade and dug in the corner where I had buried my treasure. The iron chest was still in the same place. No one had touched it. It is in the corner that is shaded by a beautiful fig tree my father planted on the day of my birth. By a strange and sad coincidence, this memory, which was to have contributed to the comfort of the woman I adored, will today serve the same purpose. Oh, understand well my meaning. You are a generous man, Albert, but maybe you are blinded by pride or resentment. If you refuse me, if you ask another for what I have the right to offer you, I can but say it is ungenerous of you to refuse what is offered to your mother by one whose father was made to suffer the horrors of hunger and despair by your father. Albert waited in silence for his mother's decision after she had finished reading the letter. I accept, said he. He has the right to pay the dowry I shall take with me to the convent. Placing the letter against her heart, she took her son's arm and went down the stairs with a step that surprised her by its firmness. Meanwhile, Monte Cristo had also returned to town with Emmanuel and Maximilian, and was sitting wrapped in thought when the door suddenly opened. The Count frowned. Monsieur le Comte de Moncouf, announced Baptiste, as though the name was an excuse enough for his admittance. Ask Monsieur de Moncouf into the salon. When Monte Cristo joined the general, he was pacing the length of the floor for the third time. It is really you, Monsieur de Moncouf, said Monte Cristo calmly. I thought I had not heard right. Yes, it is I, said the Count with a frightful contraction of the lips which prevented him from articulating clearly. I only require to know now to what I owe the pleasure of seeing the Count of Monte at such an early hour, continued Monte Cristo. You had a meeting with my son this morning, monsieur. You knew about it. I also know that my son had very good reason to fight you and do his utmost to kill you. He had, but you see that notwithstanding these reasons, he did not kill me. In fact, he did not fight. Yet he looked upon you as the cause of his father's dishonor and the terrible calamity that has now befallen my house. That is true, monsieur, said Monte Cristo with dreadful calmness. The secondary cause, but not the principal one. No doubt you made some sort of apology or gave some explanation. I gave him no explanation, and it was he who apologized. But to what do you attribute such conduct? To conviction. Probably he discovered there was one more guilty than I. Who is that man? His father. That may be, said the Count, but you know the guilty do not like to hear themselves convicted of their guilt. I know, and I expected all this. You expected my son to be a coward, cried the Count. Monsieur Albert de Monte is not a coward, said Monte Cristo. A man who holds a sword in his hand, with an enemy within reach of it, is a coward if he does not strike. That he were here that I might tell him so. I presume you have not come here to tell me your little family affairs, replied Monte Cristo coldly. Go and say that to Monsieur Albert. Perhaps he will know what answer to give you. No, I have not come for that, replied the general with a smile which disappeared immediately. I came to tell you that I too look upon you as my enemy. I have come to tell you that I instinctively hate you, that I seem to have known and hated you always. As the young men of this generation no longer fight, it is for us to do. Are you of this opinion? Certainly, but let me tell you that when I said I was expecting this, I was referring to your visit. All the better. Your preparations are made. I am always ready, monsieur. You understand that we shall fight till one of us drops, said the general, clenching his teeth in rage. Till one of us drops, repeated Monte Cristo, slowly nodding his head. Let us go, then. We have no need for seconds. Indeed, it were useless, replied Monte Cristo. We know each other so well. On the contrary, it is because we do not know each other, said Monte Cristo with the same exasperating coldness. Are you not the soldier Fanon who deserted on the eve of the Battle of Waterloo? Are you not the Lieutenant Fanon who served the French army as a guide and spy in Spain? Are you not the Colonel Fanon who betrayed, sold, and assassinated his benefactor Ali? And have not all the Fanons combined made Lieutenant General Count of Monte Peer of France? Villain! To reproach me with my shame when you are perhaps about to kill me, replied the general as though struck by hot iron. I did not say I was unknown to you. I know well that, demon that you are, you have penetrated the obscurity of my past and have read, by light of what torch I know not, every page of my life. But perhaps there is more honor in my shame than in all your outward pomp. No, I am known to you, but I do not know you, adventurer sewn up in gold and precious stones. In Paris you call yourself the Count of Monte Cristo, in Italy Sinbad the sailor, in Malta, who knows? I have forgotten. It is your real name I now ask and wish to know, so that I may pronounce it on the field when I plunge my sword into your heart. The Count of Monte Cristo turned a ghastly color. His wild eyes were burning with a devouring flame. He bounded into the adjoining room, and within a second, tearing off his tie, his coat, and his waistcoat, had put on a sailor's blouse and sailor's hat, from under which his long black hair flowed. He returned thus attired, and with arms crossed walked up to the general, who had wondered at the sudden disappearance. On seeing him again, his teeth chattered, his legs gave way under him, and he stepped back until he found a table against which to lay his clenched hand for support. Fernand, cried Monte Cristo, I need but mention one of my names to strike terror into your heart. But you guess this name, or rather you remember it, do you not? For in spite of all my grief and tortures, I show you today a face made young by joy of vengeance, a face that you must often have seen in your dreams since your marriage with Mercedes. With head thrown back and hands stretched out, the general stared at this terrible apparition in silence. Then, leaning against the wall for support, he glided slowly along it to the door through which he went out backward, uttering but one distressing and piercing cry. Et mon Dantes! With a moan that can be compared with no human sound, he dragged himself to the yard, staggering like a drunken man, and fell into his valet's arms. Home, home, he muttered. The fresh air and the shame he felt at having given way before his servant made him pull himself together, but the drive was a short one, and the nearer he got to his house, the greater was his anguish. A few paces from his door, the carriage stopped, and the Count alighted. The door of the house was wide open. A cab, whose driver looked surprised at being called to this magnificent residence, was stationed in the middle of the yard. The Count looked at it in terror, and, not daring to question anyone, fled to his room. 2 people were coming down the staircase, and he had only just time to hide himself in a room nearby. It was Mercedes leaning on her son's arm. They were both leaving the house. They passed quite close to the unhappy man, who, hidden behind a door or curtain, felt Mercedes' silk dress brush past him and the warm breath of his son on his face as he said, "Have courage, mother. Come away. This is no longer our home." The words died away, and the steps were lost in the distance. The general drew himself up, clinging to the curtains with clenched hands, and the most terrible sob escaped him that ever came from the bosom of a father, abandoned at the same time by his wife and his son. Soon he heard the door of the cab closed, and the voice of the coachman, followed by the rumbling of the lumbersome vehicle as it shook the window panes. He rushed into his bedroom to see once more all that he had loved on earth. The cab passed, and neither Mercedes nor Albert's heads appeared at the door to take a last farewell of the deserted house, or to cast on the abandoned husband and father a last look of farewell and regret. At the very moment when the wheels of that cab passed under the arched gate, a report was heard, and dark smoke issued through the glass of the bedroom window, which had been broken by the force of the explosion. So, Fernand finally understood where all of his troubles came from. And I think that was the first time that the Count of Monte Cristo finally let himself really be Edmond again. Well, I'll see you next time.